Hello there and welcome to Yodo. I'm Dr. Sarah Bone, and this is a place where we discuss a variety of topics related to serious illness and end of life. Today we're going to go over information about death certificates. The pronouncement of death and error-free certification of medical information are critical. I appreciate when meticulous care is taken to ensure that this important permanent record is correct. I want to familiarize people with the process. Whether you are a healthcare certifier, funeral home staff, medical student, resident, or fellow in training, it's helpful to understand the facets of the form and the significance that's placed on the accuracy and correctness of the information provided. For people needing a death certificate, a loved one or family member, having insight into this process does help ease some of the angst that's inherently associated with a death certificate. Certification of the medical information contained in the death certificate can be of critical importance for many reasons. And so families that have financial concerns, those are at the center of that, including the deeds, insurance, property, or nearly any financial legacy concern. We want to make sure that that death certificate is correct, fully filled out before we ever submit it. My hope is to give you a better understanding of what the death certificate is, the type of information that it contains, who might want one, who's responsible to complete the information, and we're even going to go over some of the common mistakes or errors that are found on a form. There are a few caveats. Each state has their own laws and they may have some variability in the information that's requested. While these forms may be similar state to state, it's up to the individual state regarding its process for the death certificate process. They each have their own vital statistics office. In nearly every state, the completion of the death certificate is required prior to the allowance to be granted for permit for that final disposition, for cremation, burial, entombment of the body, or even if it requires transport. So just what is a death certificate? That's the official proof of death for legal purposes. It provides important personal information about the decedent and the circumstances of the death. The death certificate is a legal and official record that documents a person's death. The information on it is going to include the person's name, sex, date of birth, date of death, time, location of the death, and it's got an opportunity to detail that underlying cause of death, as well as to gather some other statistical and demographic information. Additionally, the form is going to allow for information regarding other medical diagnoses that are suspected to have contributed to the death but maybe didn't result in that underlying cause. As for who might want a death certificate, the death certificate serves as that official proof of death, so you're probably already beginning to think ahead of who's going to want that copy of the death certificate. And a few examples are going to include estate and real estate settlements, banks, Department of Motor Vehicles, credit card companies, insurance claims for health and life insurance, and some patients may carry a special type of a policy that could possibly pay additional money if a particular diagnosis is present. Cancer policies are the ones that pop into my mind very quickly. And for some individuals, such as a military veteran or a police officer or fire person, that may have a connected disability to their occupation that might have resulted in the death. They may need an additional copy of that as well. For nearly any type of financial, property, or business that the decedent might have been involved, a death certificate is typically going to be needed. Also, the data from the death certificate is going to be utilized for many other purposes, particularly public health officials and researchers that have interest in the death certificate information, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Who's responsible to complete the death certificate kind of depends on the manner of death, certainly the funeral home, but for the medical certifier, it kind of depends on that manner. Before I delve into the manner of death, though, I want to introduce the procedure of death pronouncement to you. This is the evaluation of the person and that declaration of death. Pronouncement and manner of death are closely associated. The legal ability for pronouncement varies state by state and depending on the situation. Pronouncement refers to the date and time when the individual was declared legally dead. The person that makes the pronouncement may not be the person completing the death certificate. When available, the attending physician is going to perform that death pronouncement. And I say when available, as an increasing number of patients are now electing for end of life to occur in a non-hospital setting. Thus, there may be only loved ones, hospice staff, or possibly facility staff that are present at the time of death. So who makes that pronouncement in those situations is going to vary. It'll just depend. The certifier is the person that's going to complete the form of the death certificate, and they must complete relevant portions of the death certificate and deliver that signed document or the electronically authenticated death certificate to the funeral director for the next step in the process prior to that document going to vital statistics for permanent recording. The clinician completing the document must be available to respond to any questions from the registrar and provide any supplemental reports regarding the cause of death that might be needed or requested. Now on to information about the manner of death. Manner could include natural, accident, suicide, homicide, undetermined, or pending further investigation. The medical examiner or county coroner can complete the death certificate under any circumstance, and they will be required to complete the document if the death is not listed as natural. When it's a natural death, the patient's attending medical provider of record is the first individual contacted for that death certificate completion. Physicians and, in some states, licensed independent practitioners such as nurse practitioners are legally able to complete the death certificate form. Thus, it is important for clinicians to be aware of the regulations of their state and how it applies to them specifically. Under the circumstances of natural death, when a person has a do not resuscitate preference, and that form is signed and present with them at the time of death, that clinician of record will be requested to complete that death certificate. For patients in a community home-like setting, the physician identified by the family is typically going to be requested to fill out that data. This continuity aids for accuracy and completeness of the form. However, many times the physician of record is unavailable either or both for the activities of pronouncement and death certificate completion, and therefore it could be another person to complete either or possibly both of these tasks. As a hospice medical director, I've completed many death certificates for patients that were on our service. As a hospice patient has been declining over time, the most recent evaluations have been performed not only by our hospice staff and by myself, but more so than that primary physician or specialist. Because the patient is nearing the end of life, their ability to get out of the home and see their primary doctor or see their specialist has become so limited that probably all care and visits have been provided by us, by the hospice vendor. As there's no reimbursement or pay for completing a death certificate, many clinicians prefer that the hospice agency caring for that patient at the end of life assume that workload and responsibility for the time-consuming task of completing a death certificate. There's no glory in completing a death certificate. Medical personnel are not paid for their time to complete the death certificate, or I've never received any kind of money or gift or workload credit for completing a death certificate. Unattended deaths in a private home when hospice is caring for the patient do not typically require an investigation, as often the death has been anticipated. The do not resuscitate form has often been completed and is on hand because the hospice staff that's involved with caring for that patient is usually and should be excellent at preparing the patient and the family for that event of death. As devastating as the death is, having support and being prepared eases some of that anguish. Having the do not attempt resuscitation form in the home also eases the tension around the event of the body being removed from the home. In most states, police or the sheriff's office is required to evaluate a scene if a death occurs and that form is not completed. This just adds needlessly to a family's heartache. For deaths in a hospital setting, the attending physician or house officer or nursing staff that's present at the time of death, they can complete that pronouncement. Likely the hospital clinician, the one that's listed as the primary physician of record, is going to complete the death certificate regardless of the time of death and if that professional was present at the time of death. For patients in an institutional group setting, such as a nursing home, assisted living, independent living setting, again, it may be the nursing staff, hospice staff, or possibly ambulance or emergency responders that are going to perform that pronouncement. Under those circumstances, for the death certificate completion, again, it's probably going to be that attending physician or clinician of record that's going to be offered to fill that out first. When a physician does not have the data that's needed to complete the death certificate, the coroner or medical examiner is going to become involved. There are occasions when a death is listed as natural, yet the medical examiner or coroner has been notified because there's been a remote injury that might have been a contributing factor to the death. Many facilities make it a policy to contact the local medical examiner office to review the circumstances that have occurred around that individual's death, because if there was a fall or a surgery that occurred, that medical examiner has the ability to request the body or decline that case. As I said, the coroner and the medical examiner are required to be involved in deaths with questionable, unusual, or suspicious deaths, or if the death is a result of an injury, accident, or homicide. If an autopsy is mandated, the government might pay for it. If it's requested by a family or an estate, then a private payer source is typically going to be financially needed to be responsible for that cost. Costs for an autopsy can start at $3,000 to $10,000 and can go quite high. There are some clerical responsibilities associated with completing on the form by that funeral home that's that initially prepares the form, but most of the material that's contained on the form is going to be responsible by that licensed individual. Fields filled out by the funeral home are typically going to include patient demographics, their name, date of birth. Most likely they will fill out the date and time of death, but they're not necessarily required to. The medical certifier is usually required to fill that out. But address and location and other information that's demographic information, their business information is also going to be recorded on that form. Many people ask, how long is it going to take to get the death certificate? And that can vary quite a bit depending on the circumstance. A week to a couple of months is probably a good range of time. It's important to note that each step of that death certificate completion process is allowed only a certain amount of time. And that's typically like 3 days, 3 calendar days, not working days per step in the process. But because there are so many steps in the process, even though it's just a few days, those steps do add up. If there are extenuating circumstances, such as required autopsy or toxicology reports, and studies that need to be done to determine that cause of death, there may be additional time added onto that and can make this process quite long. If the death certificate can't be completed until after those results are back, it's going to be a very long process. The funeral home initiates that death certificate form completion process, and then the form is on to the next person. Once the medical certifier completes their portion of the document, they're going to return it to the funeral director, who's going to file the completed document with the vital statistics of that state. As for where or how to obtain a completed death certificate, typically the death certificate could be obtained from the state and county where the death occurred, or through the funeral home that handled the arrangements for the decedent. Most families are going to place their order for the number of certified copies at the time of making the final arrangements with the funeral home. At the time that those arrangements are being completed, there's an opportunity to specify the number of certified and informal copies that are anticipated to be needed for various legal purposes. Try to get an accurate count of how many you might need and maybe even get a few extra. It's often less difficult and typically less expensive when these are obtained initially and not at a later date. When providing the document to others, please confirm that the copy that you're going to send them is the kind of document that they need, because if you send out the information, you're not likely to get that death certificate back. And if you send a certified copy to somebody who would take an informational copy, you just lost one of your certified copies. Most times, a certified copy is going to be required. The certified copy is going to indicate it's official. Most often, it's going to carry an official seal that's raised. There might be an original inked legal signature from an official. However, there are going to be times when that official copy is not necessary, and the requesting entity or company is going to accept a non-certified copy. The informational copies could be a photocopy, and they're going to have all the same data and information on it, but they're likely going to have a watermark indicating that they're a copy, or the seal's not going to be raised. The copies are acceptable for personal records, but not usually going to be accepted for any legal or financial transactions. More copies can always be obtained by placing the order with the proper department of the state and county where that death occurred. Often it's going to be the Department of Health. And there are certainly third-party services that are going to assist with getting a death certificate, but I imagine that's going to be an additional price. Laws can vary state to state about who can obtain a copy of a death certificate and what information is publicly available. In some states, the death certificate may be part of public record after 25 years. Other states are going to continue to require a legal release along with information of the decedent, such as name, date of birth, date of death, and the Social Security number. The cause of death is going to be listed on that death certificate. The information requested for the cause of death is to specify the medical condition that led to death. There are 2 parts for describing the conditions of the death: the immediate cause and the sequence of illnesses that led to the death, as well as a second part that's going to contain information about conditions that may have contributed to the death but didn't lead to the ultimate underlying cause. And I want to stress the point that the immediate cause of death, that final disease process, is to be from the physician's best medical opinion. Most circumstances, we're not going to need a lab report or imaging or pathology evaluation to determine that final causing process that caused the disease to advance to the point of death. Let me jump to what's not accepted and why, and then we'll backtrack to the other type of information. So not accepted are general conditions, vague health states. For example, old age or death by old age, frailty or failure to thrive, dementia, weight loss or poor nutrition or malnutrition or debility, senescence, infirmity, or bedfast. Also not accepted are terminal events, and by that I mean what happened when they died, such as cardiac arrest or respiratory arrest. These two terms don't define the underlying cause, they only outline the outcome and not the cause of death. Let me go to a sidebar, and we're going to talk a bit about what this data is used for and who wants it, and that's going to give you additional insight into the importance of these death causes. Vital statistics, Center for Disease Control, Public Health and Safety, as well as World Health Organizations are all interested in this information. The data is recorded electronically and to be used by federal and state agencies for public health surveillance, to monitor trends, for various administrative functions such as discontinuation of payments and benefits, as well as monitoring and predicting healthcare trends, disease patterns, and what are society risks, not to mention the statisticians and researchers across many medical fields that have need for this data. The National Center for Health Statistics monitors this closely for better understanding of changes in the causes of death. They're monitoring the development and change of various disease states, as well as confirming progress towards treating diseases by use of various therapies and new interventions, plus as a measure of metric for evaluation the quality of care delivery. The NCHS publishes mortality summary data that can be found online. The accuracy of facts is important as a public health trend changes over time. Tracking of a disease state, allocation of resources, policy goals, determining areas of research needs, and where the dollars are going to go all rely on the details that's in this information, thus that importance of accuracy from the information. Facts from death certificates across the nation are compiled into multiple databases, and it's monitored closely for those statistical purposes. And I want to underscore the importance of this mortality data and research. This should give some explanation why these vague terms are to be avoided. Phrases such as death from old age are just not acceptable as a diagnosis for cause of death. Let's know the type of dementia. Was it Alzheimer's dementia? Was it mini stroke related dementia? Was it TBI dementia? Somebody had traumatic brain injuries that resulted in dementia. Was it frontotemporal lobe? Was it Lewy body? Was it Parkinson's dementia? So with frailty, what caused the frailty? What caused the person to be debilitated? We just can't use some of these more general terms. They're just too general, and we have a lot better diagnostic information that we can provide for our statistical following of what happened to these patients. So that takes us back to the cause of death. We know that a heart event and a cardiac arrest have occurred, so we want to have the underlying cause of that cardiac arrest. Examples in the information that we might want to include would be coronary artery disease or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Other examples might include late effects from stroke. The primary cause might be hyperlipidemia. A person with metastatic cancer might have liver metastasis from a primary lung cancer. The end result in their heart stopping is still the same, that cardiac arrest, but the cause of that cardiac arrest is told by the disease process. Some patients have had a cascading illness, and the information on the death certificate is going to reflect this. Diabetes mellitus leading to cerebral arterial atherosclerosis, resulting in cerebral infarction, causing a decubitus ulcer wound that became infected, and the end result being septic shock, causing the person's death. For hospice patients, Medicare and other payer sources would like to anticipate that the listed terminal diagnosis that qualified that person for hospice service is going to be the primary cause of death listed on that death certificate. I foresee changes coming in time that are going to provide a lot more detail in the information that's contained in the death certificate. In the section regarding the cause of death, brief and general information regarding the timeline of illness is also conveyed. It might be hours, days, weeks, months, or possibly years. There are occasions when the timeline is uncertain, and it is acceptable to put the word unknown in that area under some circumstances. There are many disease processes that additional information may be required, and I'm not going to give an entire list, but I will give you a few examples. Abscess and hemorrhage are going to require information regarding the location with a brief detail requested. Anemia, you're going to want to provide information about the type or possibly the cause of that anemia. Infection, sepsis, or cellulitis, we're going to want to have information about the location and if we know that causing organism that was identified. Cirrhosis, there are very many causes of cirrhosis, so we want to have more information than just the word cirrhosis on that death certificate. Heart failure, was it systolic or diastolic heart failure or combined? What was the effect on the ejection fraction, and do we know the cause of that heart failure? Pneumonia or urinary tract infection, we're going to want to identify if we were able to delineate what that causing organism was. And if somebody died from shock, we want to have some defining information regarding the cause of the shock. Other fields that need to be filled out are going to include if there's a relationship of tobacco use to the death, was there a recent surgery, injury, or accident, and for all female patients, the death certificate needs to respond to questions regarding pregnancy. Some states are going to request information regarding the decedent's level of education. Nationality and race are typically going to be required fields on demographic portions. Other common fields are going to include the marital status of the decedent at the time of death, location of the person when the death occurred, and of course name of the funeral home and questions pertaining to their business. Questions regarding autopsy and referral to a medical examiner are required to be completed as well. For deaths that autopsy is required or the medical examiner is completing the forms, those are often, again, going to be slower to be completed and get back to you. The time that it takes for microscopic and toxicology reports to be completed can add days to weeks to that completion process for the death certificate. Then the name and license number of the certifier or the medical professional that's completing the form, as well as the date that that form was completed. So those are some of the other questions and fields that are present in the form. Common errors that can result in the death certificate not being accepted could include misspelled names, inaccurate date of birth or date of death or time of death, incorrect, vague, or insufficient information about the medical cause of death, inadequate information regarding other contributing causes of the death, things that were omitted or left out. Abbreviations or acronyms that were used on the death certificate may not be accepted. Not using black ink. A mistake in the original time or stamped accepted signature through a web portal. Sometimes computer errors do occur. And the form can't have any mark-throughs, alterations, whiteout marks, or erasures present on it. So now let's go through some of the various fields on a death certificate just to kind of give you a little bit. We'll go through one of them live that I've got here. Have to get my little cheater glasses on. So this one is not for the state of Florida. I don't have a blank state of Florida one here, but I do have one from another state. And it asks the decedent's name, sex, social security number. It asks for their age at the time of death, as well as their date of birth, their location of birth, county, city, state of birth. It asks for their home, most recent home address, marital status. This form actually asks if they were in the armed forces. It asks for the name and address of the informant's name, which is usually either the loved one or who provided the information about the death. And it asks for the information regarding the name of the person who was pronounced the death. Then the next part of the form is about the funeral home, their name, their address, the funeral home's medical director's name, their county, city, state, and their local phone number and license number. Then the next portion of the form is what's filled out by the medical certifier, and it confirms the name of the medical certifier, confirms the name, if different, than the certifier of the attending of record. The date and time of death, and the time is always in 24-hour military time. And then the section on cause of death. And this one has 4 different lines. And so what they just put on here, for example, is chronic ischemic heart disease as number D, which led to acute myocardial infarction, which was number C, which led to B, which was congestive heart failure, which led to A, which was pulmonary embolism. And it's they've listed it in minutes, days, weeks, and years. And then there's the next section, or part 2, is to enter any conditions that contributed to the death but not resulting in the underlying cause. And they've got diabetes mellitus listed here. Was an autopsy performed, yes or no? Were the autopsy results available at the time of this being filled out, which was not applicable because no autopsy was done? Was the tobacco related to the cause of death? If the patient was female, and it specifies not pregnant within the prior year, and then there are several other selections. So if your patient was 80 years old, you're going to mark that not pregnant within the past year, or this form will come back to you. Then the questions regarding manner of death, then if there was an injury and what the injury was there a fracture, was there a surgery, what was the date of any of those events, and if there was an injury, was the injury at work, and then the information about the certifier, their name, their license number, and the date that they signed that form. In summary, I hope you have a better understanding of a death certificate and the process behind it. I hope that gives you a little peace of mind. This is a legal document, and it's used not only for family, personal use, but it's also to fulfill the needs for settlements, addressing estates and finances, and then the information is used by many others for purposes such as research, public health and safety, as well as forecasting for the health of our nation. I want to thank you for the kind comments and really helping this channel grow. I think this was a really good question about death certificates, and if I left something out or if you've got another question, please put it in a comment below. Bye now.